Hi there guys, it's Adam Martin here and welcome back to another video on AMTV Who, and today I wanted to talk a bit of theorising, a what if moment if you will. Different timelines are certainly very popular at the minute. I mean, if you're a Marvel fan, you know that their what if series was actually quite interesting to sort of sit down and engage with. Sure, not every episode was a out and out winner, but the idea of alternative timelines, alternative possibilities certainly piqued a lot of interest. And I know a lot of people have said, well, why doesn't Doctor Who adapt a similar path? It's certainly ripe for the picking with 60 years worth of history, not just in TV, but in, comics, books, audio adventures. There's so much scope you can do. And one of the big ones, at least for me, that I'd be curious would be, what if Colin Baker was convinced to stay for a third season as the Sixth Doctor? So just a bit of context for anyone who might not be as familiar with the behind-the-scenes stuff. Colin Baker, of course, played the Sixth Doctor on TV from 1984 to 1986, and it's fair to say when he got the part, I think he had a lot of optimism, he had a lot of hope for the part. In various interviews, he was actually quoted as saying, when asked how long do you want to stay, do you want to beat Tom Baker's record of 7 years, he actually would say, I'm going to stay as long as you want me, and he actually wanted, I think, originally to be the longest-running Doctor Who ever, which is certainly a fair ambition, to say the least. But when he took over, his first full season, season 22, there was a lot of change going on there. Stories were extended to 45-minute episodes instead of 25. There's always some debate as to whether that format worked, particularly for Classic Who. I'd argue for certain stories it worked really well, like Revelation of the Daleks, I think works really well in the 45-minute format. But for other adventures, it didn't work quite as well. So there was that going on. And then, of course, halfway through, you had the famous 18-month hiatus where it was put on sort of that extended break, killed a lot of the momentum. I mean, in 1985, Doctor Who was still getting, around 7 million viewers, which back then wasn't necessarily like the tip of the top, but it was certainly respectable for a program that was over 20 years old at the time. When the show did come back in late 1986, the viewership had sadly dwindled quite a lot, even though I think the Trial of a Time Lord story arc they went for is actually quite engaging throughout its 14 episodes. It's one of my favourite 80s sort of stories, episodes, arcs, whatever you want to call it. Really nice to delve back into from time to time. But there was so much behind the scenes drama from that, particularly when producer John Nathan Turner got the instructions from upstairs, as it were, from the BBC, basically saying, listen, we're going to carry on the show, you can have another season for 1987, however, Colin Baker's got to go. He was basically being sacked. And, you got to feel for Colin. He's told numerous times in interviews how he went to the BBC bosses and basically tried to negotiate with them, and how, because obviously they wanted him to do the regeneration in the opening story. And I believe, if I've got my history right, someone might correct me in the comments, but I think the BBC basically said, look, we'll give you the opening story of the next season, and then you regenerate at the end of it. Colin Baker, quite rightly in my opinion, with all the hassle he'd been through, said, give me the full season and then I'll go at the end of it, to which the BBC said, all right, we'll go and think about that and we'll let you know. And he never heard back, so he then decided not to take part in the regeneration sequence. So then you have Sylvester McCoy lying on the floor in a wig, regenerating. Not the most convincing, but, hey, they had to work with what they had at the time. Now, we know for a fact that, the Sixth Doctor's regeneration has been better chronicled. Like, for example, in Big Finish, they released a set called what was it called now? The Last Adventure is what it was called. That ties up the Sixth Doctor stuff really well. But again, the main purpose of this is, what if he stayed? What if he stayed for season 24? Could you imagine the Sixth Doctor in stories like Time of the Rani, Paradise Towers, Delta and the Bannerman, and Dragonfire? Well, let's have a think about it. Let's talk about it. So the previous season, Trial of a Time Lord, it had its quirkier moments, but a lot of people would argue that that season has a particularly doom and gloom element to it. It's very dark in places, and that might be reflective of where the show was at. It was basically fighting for its life. The whole, the trial of the Doctor was the trial of the show, so to speak. But it definitely had its darker moments, like everything with Perry in parts 5 to 8. Some parts of Terror of the Vervoids as well, the last 2 parts. There were some grim moments in there. Season 24, by contrast, what we got is very light-hearted, it's very campy, it's very upbeat, some would say too much. Again, I think that's perfectly fine if that's what you're in the mood for. Like, Delta and the Bannerman gets derided so much for just being a bit of a campy mess, but, if I'm in the right mood for that, then it's a great time. It's a fun 3-part watch. But what if the Sixth Doctor stayed? So, Time and the Rani, I mean, I think automatically that would work out of the gate, because the Sixth Doctor has history with the Rani. In fact, that's where the character was introduced in Mark of the Rani back in 1985. So a rematch for that same Doctor, I think, would be even better. I think the stakes would be higher. I mean, Colin's a great actor, as we all know, and I think seeing him sort of go up against the Rani again in this particular scenario, you know, the Rani gathering geniuses and such like, I think that would have been a really nice face-off, to be honest. Also, I can just see the Sixth Doctor, like, working really well in, like, the whole landscape of what's going on, like, with the Lacurtians and the Tep traps and stuff. And you could argue, with Colin's character already established, it would add some, like, levity, some gravitas to the stakes as well. Not that Sylvester McCoy doesn't, absolutely, but I think with the change that would have to come if you kept the same Doctor, it would necessitate those stakes being raised even further. But what about Paradise Towers? Now, for me, this is the one where I'd arguably see the Sixth Doctor working the best in. You know, the TARDIS lands in these dingy apartments with warring factions and lots of stuff going on. And I think you can keep those, like, more campier moments, if you want to call them that, or the more silly moments and stuff like that. But could you imagine the Sixth Doctor going up against the Chief Caretaker? I think that would be a really, like, fun confrontation. Like, you can just imagine the Sixth Doctor just, like, losing it and blasting, like, these rules apart that the Caretaker has to follow, this whole system and the warring factions and all that. I don't know, I just think because the Sixth Doctor was a lot more brash and a lot more bold and a lot less afraid to sort of, you know, say it how it was, get himself into those situations, I can actually see Paradise Towers working pretty well in his favour as written, if you get me. Then we move on to Delta and the Bannerman. Now, I think this is one where people will probably find it the most jarring, because, you know, Delta, the story as it was, you know, it's set in a Welsh holiday camp in the 1950s. It's very light-hearted. It is, you know, it is very much what it says on the tin. But again, there's a lot of great comedy in there. There's a lot of funny moments in there because of the characters that work in there, the way Sylvester McCoy and Bonnie Langford throw themselves in there as well. And I'm not saying Colin wouldn't be able to do that. You know, the whole point of an actor and being an actor myself is you're meant to adapt to different styles, you know, whether that's comedy, that's drama, whatever it is, your job is to adapt. And I think Colin could definitely adapt. I mean, we know he's funny. His Doctor is funny, but I just don't know. If you took Delta as is and plopped the Sixth Doctor in it, I just don't know how well that would translate over, if that makes sense. I don't know if his brashness would work against all this light and jubilation. Maybe it would. I don't know. But I'd be very interested to know what you guys think about that, because for me, it's not that I'm struggling to see the Sixth Doctor in it, but I think you'd have to really sort of rework the whole tone of the piece to make it fit. But again, that's just an opinion. And then Dragonfire. Now, Dragonfire is arguably, again, this is all for debate, you could argue it's maybe the most, or one of the more serious pieces of Season 24. Paradise Towers is as well, but Dragonfire is to some extent too. And again, the Sixth Doctor, you could say, with the like Glitz is in there, the Sixth Doctor seeing Glitz again would be quite funny as well. And the Sixth Doctor and Ace, now that'd be a pairing, wouldn't it? You know, Ace's sort of no-nonsense nature against the Doctors. Actually, they'd probably be at loggerheads quite a lot. Makes you wonder, actually, because obviously then we had Dimensions in Time, where they very briefly meet. And they don't really go at loggerheads at all. They're actually quite cordial with each other. But remember, as we all know, Dimensions in Time, no matter what anyone says, is canon. Happy 30th to Dimensions in Time while we're at it as well. But yeah, just that whole thing of Ice World, I can imagine the Sixth Doctor working really well in it. Would he do the same cliffhanger in part 1? Probably not, you know, hanging for... Oh, maybe he would, actually. That might actually be quite funny with Colin doing it. But I just think that there's so much potential for the Sixth Doctor in Season 24 as is. As I say, for some stories like Delta, you might have to rework a lot of it, but I think with the stories that are there, the tone actually works quite well for Colin's Doctor. Sort of his brashness, that bluntness it is a contrast, but I think it contrasts quite nicely with the more light-hearted, jovial nature of it. But then, let's work on established history. Colin had originally said, if you give me the whole of the next season, I'll go at the end of it. So let's just think about Dragonfire for a second. So what part of Dragonfire could potentially cause the Sixth Doctor's regeneration? Well, just trying to think. Maybe it's a confrontation he has with the villain, Kane. I'm not sure, like, how much that would necessitate a regeneration, or maybe it's something to do with the, you know, the titular dragon. Maybe it's like power from the dragon causes him to regenerate or something like that. I just, you know, I'm trying to... Admittedly, I haven't watched Dragonfire for about a year or two, probably not since the Season 24, the original limited edition Blu-ray came out, and I'm just struggling to see, again, like... Obviously, that story wasn't written with the regeneration in mind, but I'm trying to think, like, how could you adapt it with that setting, that world, those characters? How could you adapt it to necessitate a regeneration? Hey, why not just go for broke? Why not just say, hey, listen, the Sixth Doctor was hanging off the cliff, and he fell... and he regenerated. You know, maybe it could be as daft as that, just like it ends up being in Time and the Rani. Who knows? But yeah, I just wanted to wax lyrical about, you know, what I think the Sixth Doctor could be like in this season. I mean, please let me know what you think in the comments as well. Do you think that Colin Baker's Doctor would fit really well against these stories, or do you think a whole new batch of stories should have made up season 24? Like, let me know what you think in the comments, because I just think theorizing about this, that could make a really great what if thing. You know, if Doctor Who ever did go down the what if route, and they are partnered with Disney after all, but if they ever did go down that route, you know, to showcase alternative routes or adventures or whatever, I definitely think the Sixth Doctor staying on for another season is definitely a key idea that I think would be really, really cool. But let me know what you think in the comments, as always, and also let me know what other what-if scenarios would you like to see Doctor Who placed in. I mean, if you guys enjoyed this sort of discussion, let me know down in the comments what sort of what-if scenarios you'd like to see in Doctor Who, whether that be classic or modern. Yeah, let me know down below. Also, leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. We really appreciate it, and it helps us out. I've been Adam Martin from AMTV Who. Please do subscribe, and we'll see you next time for another trip in the TARDIS.